What were their arguments? What happened in this time that gave some, but not all, elites? Remember, the Anti-Federalists are elites too. The governor of New York, so George Clinton, not the George Clinton today, but the governor George Clinton, Patrick Henry. I mean, these are not nobodies. These are not little tiny yeoman farmers. These are major power sources in their own right. So these are both elite groups. They see the same world differently, which is the way elite groups do today. And they fought over the failures, allegedly, of the Articles. So what were those failures?
Disputes between states.
Good. So disputes between the states. Tiffany?
Yeah.
Okay. So disputes between the states. About what?
Money.
Money, trade, relations with foreign countries. The United States had basic treaty power, but not commerce power, which meant that Georgia and Virginia could fight over treaties with France about goods and about trade. And the countries in Europe thought this was a joke. They would play the different states against each other, and everybody was an independent operator. So that worked fine, actually, for some groups, but the founding generation thought it was an embarrassment for a country that's not a country. Then there were the economic crisis, and then of course the defense of the borders, but also the problem of economic stability at home. And there's a famous incident that, again, I think that a lot of people, even if they don't understand all the parts of it, in 1786 there's a famous incident that shows the economic questions and domestic instability, allegedly. You can actually sympathize with the rebellion. You don't have to sympathize with the Federalists here. What was it?
Farmers Revolt?
Yes. Good. So Shays' Rebellion. What is the plight here? It's of the farm. And Shays was a revolutionary officer who left his farm to fight. But the taxes built up in his absence and he wasn't paid. So they foreclosed on his farm. And this happened to tens of thousands of people across the United States. So in Western Massachusetts, he said, we're going to shut down the bankruptcy courts and prevent them from seizing our land. Doesn't that sound like a sympathetic story that the revolutionary generation should be rallying around? Well, one of the problems is that the Revolutionary War was fought without a lot of money because, remember, the Articles of Confederation couldn't extract money. They had to beg for money from the states. They had no mechanism to get money to pay the soldiers or equip them. So this becomes a crisis. Elites look at this in horror, and it gets worse from the elite perspective. One was, how do you put down this rebellion? And eventually it was put down. But there was no national armed services. There were just local militias. More importantly was the question of the banking elite. And you don't have to sympathize. But it's easy to understand this with today's debtor crisis all across the United States. What is the point of a contract if it can be just dissolved because you can't pay back? And what is the point of having law if you can't enforce your contracts? So here's the problem. The Federalists said you can't have a national economy unless you have national law. And you can't have national law unless you have a national constitution where money matters across state lines. Because Shays' Rebellion was a rebellion, but in Rhode Island, debtors controlled the legislature. And they would pass a bill saying, if you can't pay back your debt, don't. That's the law of Rhode Island. Doesn't that sound strange? But it's also more responsive, right? If you're going to have a state government that is responding to the people, why not say if you can't pay back your debt, then don't? And again, this is considered horrible to a certain sector of the founding generation. So what they wanted to do here, under B, was to say that the states have limits. They have military limits. They have foreign policy limits. And they have limits to how they can undermine economic authority of the United States. They believed that the United States had to be something other than a collection of sovereign units. So you can imagine, and they're not hiding any of this, you can imagine that people who advocated for the states were very upset and believed that the Federalists were betraying the causes of the Revolution.